In Newfoundland and Labrador, you can tell Jiggs Dinner is being cooked before you even walk inside. Steamed up windows are a sure sign there's a big pot of supper on the boil. Jiggs Dinner, a veritable melting pot of salted beef, root vegetables, and yellow split peas, is one of the most recognizable and beloved meals in the province, and it's the one that makes people feel at home when they're a million miles away. I'm Glenn Warren, and I'm the host of Seasons Eatings, and this is a special Christmas edition of Seasons Eatings. And if you're a long-time listener, you know that I grew up in Newfoundland. That's Canada's easternmost province. I spent most of my childhood here. I moved away when I was a young adult and came back probably about 3 or 4 years ago now to live again in Newfoundland. One of the main meals on Sunday is called Sunday dinner, obviously, or Jiggs Dinner. It's a combination of salted beef, boiled cabbage, potatoes, turnip, and boiled pudding in a bag. And of course, everything is covered with a nice rich layer of gravy. Now, you make enough of this meal to last you for a few days, and the next day you basically take all the boiled vegetables, mash them up into little bits, and chop up the meat and make what we used to call hash. So you'd have hash for supper the next day. So let's explore the history and origins of Jiggs Dinner.
Time when everybody smiles, eyes are shining bright. I still remember how I used to feel. Look at us now, walking around in the snow. We do it in a very Christmas way. And Santa Claus, it's the number one most magical time of the year. Mistletoe hanging everywhere, waiting to declare love is here in the air. We can stroll side by side all night. I'll hold your hand so tight and always remember the way that we feel. Look at us now, walking around in the snow. We do it very Christmas way. Soon there will be sleigh bells and Santa Claus. It's the number one most magical time of the year. Christmas way.
A lot of Newfoundland people come from Ireland and England, and of course a lot of their recipes and cuisine comes from that part of the world. One of the main ingredients in Jiggs Dinner is corned beef or salt beef. Corned beef was an Irish export brought to North America in the 17th century to feed British and French settlers, and root vegetables like those found in Jiggs Dinner, that's potatoes, turnip, and cabbage, although cabbage is technically not a root vegetable, were the most easily grown in this climate. All the components would also store very well in a root cellar over the long, harsh winters endured by the first settlers of Canada and across New England. Semantics aside, the beloved dishes are a taste of Newfoundland and Labrador, and while elsewhere in the world it can be recognized as corned beef and cabbage, Jiggs is iconically Newfoundland and Labrador, even though the name isn't. So where did the name come from? Traditional Jiggs Dinner is derived from a kitchen party when we all got together for some great fun. So this is what usually was served, boiled dinner. To do a jig is to do a dance. Another explanation comes from my understanding of Jiggs came from the meat company in New York when it was imported to Newfoundland in Jiggs barrels. The salt meat was used to create for boiled dinner, hence a Jiggs Dinner. Another possible explanation of the name is all the vegetables that are in the pot may not be done at the same time. Thus, you may have to jig out the vegetables that are cooked in the pot as you put in others. In some respects, this process is similar to jigging for codfish in the ocean. Jiggs dinners and Jiggs suppers were popular fundraising events in Newfoundland in the 1920s and 30s, especially on the West Coast. Newspapers reported meals in aid of schools, churches, and something called a hustlers' club, which, despite appearances to the contrary, referred to a type of service organization. Most of these announcements assumed the reader would already know what a Jiggs Dinner was. You'd have to flip back to the newspaper archives to November 7th, 1922, in the edition of the Evening Telegram to find a clue to the actual meaning of Jiggs. Mr. Jiggs is not going to Dinty Moore's on Thursday night, as he can get his favorite dish of corned beef and cabbage at St. Joseph's Hall. Gents tickets $1, ladies 70 cents. The playful advertisement is a riff on the popular comic Bringing Up Father. In the strip, Jiggs is an Irish-American construction worker and thrust into the upper crust when he wins $1 million in a sweepstakes. Despite his newfound wealth, Jiggs has no interest in giving up his working-class lifestyle, and the comic is named for his social climbing wife, Maggie's constant attempts to bring his level of sophistication up to high society standards. Jiggs regularly finds himself on the wrong end of Maggie's rolling pin after sneaking out of the house for drinks with his old buddies or ruining a cocktail party by showing up in his undershirt. Jiggs' favorite fare is corned beef and cabbage, a cheap, folksy meal. Since Maggie refuses to cook it for him, he eats his fill in secret at a local pub called Dinty Moore's. First published in 1913, by the 1920s, Bringing Up Father was beloved worldwide, read from St. John's to Shanghai. There were stage plays, radio specials, and silent films based on its characters. And the strip's creator, George McMahon, was the highest paid cartoonist in the world. Jiggs dinners weren't held only in Newfoundland. They also popped up in California, Florida, Illinois, Michigan, and Pennsylvania over the course of the 1920s. An article published in a 1937 issue of the Colorado Potato Grower, the newsletter of the Colorado Potato Growers Exchange, even credited the popularity of the lowly potato to the important role boiled potatoes play in a Jiggs dinner. The meal itself, though, wasn't McMahon's invention. His character, Jiggs, was a send-up of working-class Irish Catholic tastes. and corned beef and cabbage was a staple of the Irish-American diet. Although today we associate the words corned beef with either pickled brisket of Jewish American delicatessens or the tins of spam-like bully beef used to feed Commonwealth soldiers during the Second World War, corned simply means salted. Our salt beef is one version of corned beef. The corns are actually large grains of salt that are used to cure the meat. Historically, corned beef was a luxury item in Ireland, but it became a major Irish export during the 17th century. Irish corned beef was shipped to British and French colonies, used to feed enslaved Africans in the West Indies, and rationed out to sailors in the British Navy. When Irish immigrants discovered that this food had been scarce and costly at home, was available and affordable in North America, they incorporated it into their dinners, alongside inexpensive vegetables like cabbage, potato, and turnip. Boiled salt beef and vegetables were eaten not only in Newfoundland and Labrador, but in Irish-descended communities across the continent. When Bringing Up Father came along, it suggested a name for this meal that was already familiar to many. In addition to soaking up the salt beef and yellow split peas overnight, making Jiggs Dinner requires hours of chopping and boiling and serving before it lands on the table. And across the province, everyone has their own rendition. Some cook it up or add big overplump dumplings to the pot. Some even sip on big mugs of the pot liquor, that is, the pot cooking liquid, while the dish is finishing. And many will also roast a turkey or a chicken to be accompanied with huge jugs of gravy to have with their jigs. It's called Sunday dinner. It's also sometimes called cooked dinner. It'd be called boiled dinner, but it's the trifecta of meat, veg, peas pudding that makes it Jiggs Dinner.
That time of year has come around again. Good on some but hard on others. Be kind and take care of each other. Not everyone has got a friend tonight.
It's the time of jingling bells and twinkling lights.
The time of buying everything in sight.
In the scurry of the lovers holding hands.
You're lucky if you have a friend tonight. While the ghost of Christmas present is in every tender heart, the ghost of Christmas past keep too many still apart. Since the ghost of Christmas coming is for none of us insured, for the ghost of Christmas present we open up our door.
The time of year has come and gone again.
It was good on some, but hard on others. Be kind and take care of each other. Not every everyone has got a friend tonight. While the ghost of Christmas present is in every tender heart, the ghost of Christmas past keep too many still apart. Since the ghost of Christmas coming is for none of us insured, for the ghost of Christmas present we open up our door. For the ghost of Christmas present we open up our door.
And of course, the other ingredient of Jiggs Dinner, which I mentioned before, isn't the corned beef or the boiled vegetables. It's peas pudding. Peas, as in P-E-A-S-E, is also known as peas porridge, and that's actually a savory pudding dish made of boiled legumes, typically split yellow peas, with water, salt, and spices, and often cooked with bacon or ham. In Middle English, peas, it's spelled P-E-A-S-E, was a mass noun used the same way as flour or oatmeal. Later taken to be plural form, the modern singular pea and its plural peas derive from this, in a process known as back formation. Peas pudding started off as peas pottage or peas porridge. The name peas pudding refers to a type of porridge made from yellow split peas. Fresh peas were never used as they would soil quickly, hence why the dry yellow split pea would be favored. In medieval times, poor families would only have one big pot or cauldron to cook with, so peas pottage would have been a staple meal. A big pot consisting of yellow split peas, salt, water, and spices, and occasionally meat would be hung over a fire and left there for hours to boil and cook the ingredients. And if you remember the nursery rhyme, peas porridge hot, peas porridge cold, peas porridge in the pot 5 days old. The dish that probably started off being called peas pottage would end up changing its name to peas pudding after the pudding cloth was invented. The pudding cloth was a large square of linen which could be filled with different ingredients. The four corners of the linen would then be tied together and the whole thing lowered into a boiling cauldron. This allowed puddings to be made without using animal intestines. Now, I use the term pudding, as I mentioned before in my episodes. Pudding actually just means a boiled product in usually an animal intestine, so like a sausage. Most people who think of puddings nowadays think of a sweet treat at the end of the meal. But any type of pudding would be anything boiled in usually a casing of some sort. So this is a different type of pudding that's boiled in a cloth. Using the pudding cloth had a great advantage over the previous way of cooking peas pottage, because instead of taking up the whole pot with a pottage, a pudding version of the dish could be cooked in a bag, right alongside a piece of mutton or beef or salted pork, so that two courses were cooked together in the same pot. And to make peas pudding this way, dried peas were soaked overnight, boiled, and then drained before being mixed with a little bit of seasoning, placed in the pudding cloth, and then lowered into the boiling cauldron. Now, you couldn't have Jiggs Dinner without ending the meal with figgy duff. Figgy duff is another cook-in-the-bag pudding dessert. Figgy duff is a traditional pudding from Newfoundland and Labrador, but it got its start about centuries before being boiled on the rock. Hailing from the English West Country as far back as the 16th century, its ancestor figgy pudding also doesn't contain any figs, but actually contains raisins. See, the Cornish term for raisin is fig, and duff is the Cornish term for dough. So that's where the thought for the name comes from. From the 16th century onwards, thousands of English residents arrived in Newfoundland to fish cod in the thriving fishery. And by the 18th century, when the British migration was at its peak, families were cooking up a duff for dessert. And of course, during the holidays, you would have a beverage or two with your Jiggs Dinner. Newfoundland slush is a favorite for this time of year. Basically, it's an alcoholic slushy drink made in a bucket of salt beef you use for the Jiggs Dinner. Why a salt beef bucket, you ask? Well, necessity is the mother of all invention. Salt beef is a critical component in Jiggs Dinner and typically comes in large plastic buckets, which are in abundance in any Newfoundland home. For generations, salt beef buckets had been served as the equivalent of Newfoundland Tupperware, filled with clothespins on the clothesline, use a bucket in the garden, and of course, fill your bucket with slush at Christmas time. Dale Jarvis, noted storyteller and writer, has his own slush experience round the bay last Christmas. I was trying to buy frozen lemonade, but every supermarket in town was out. Everyone had bought it for slush. Jarvis suspects the tradition of slush comes from the Welsh tradition of wassailing and may be connected to mummering. Mummering is another Newfoundland tradition which I talked about in a previous episode. The tradition of offering a visiting guest something rich and sweet to drink at Christmas time has existed in Newfoundland for decades and decades, Jarvis has said. And while the roots of slush are probably connected to mummering, wassailing, and Christmas visiting, cookbook author Barry Parsons believed it was born in the 80s. He remembers first trying it in Bonavista Bay in the early 1980s, soon after it was everywhere. Now, Christmas slush is traditionally prepared with amber rum, frozen cans of lemonade and orange juice concentrate, pineapple juice, and a whole lot of sugar. After an overnight freeze, sometimes on the porch, the slush is scooped into tall glasses and topped with lemon-lime soda for every Christmas occasion, from mummering to Nan dropping by, but in particular on Tibbs Eve, which non-Newfoundlanders would know as December 23rd, one of the biggest reveling nights of the year. Of course, I talk about Tibbs Eve on a previous episode, and I'll put the link to that in the show notes. Now, there are many iterations of Christmas slush, not just the one I mentioned before. You can get one with a pina colada version, that's one of the more popular ones. It replaces the amber rum with Malibu rum and includes whipped cream for creamsicle vibes. Singapore sling slush is another common twist, made sling-like by adding grenadine and cherry brandy. So, whatever you do, the holidays can't be complete without a large plate of salt beef, potatoes, turnip, cabbage, peas pudding, all smothered in gravy. And of course, washed down with a tall glass of Newfoundland slush.
12 o'clock hill, it's dark and still, snow is tumbling down. This Christmas time, there's hope again for all in Mabel's town. With love and understanding, we'll find a better way. The gift of peace is ours now on this Christmas day. Bells over Mabel's, how merrily they play. Peace and joy be with you on this Christmas day. Well, the star of light, it filled the night many years ago, when the Magi found the blessed child who set our hearts aglow. And since that day of wonder will live forevermore, we hail the newborn King of Kings who opened heaven's door. Bells over Mabel's, how merrily they play. Peace and joy be with you on this Christmas day. It's a rocky road that leads to home, a road with ties that bind. And you know that when you find it, life's worries leave your mind. People have their customs, Christmas is a time for love. We can stand together now, celebrating God above. Bells over maples, how merrily they play. Peace and joy be with you on this Christmas day. We'll dance and sing the new year in and share a cup of cheer, and drink to health and happiness throughout the coming year. We'll put our differences aside, our troubles all behind, and take a cup of kindness yet for days of old lang syne. Bells over maples, how merrily they play. Peace and joy be with you on this Christmas day. Bells over maples, how merrily they play. Peace and joy be with you on this Christmas day.
I'm Glenn Warren, host of the Seasons Eatings podcast. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Seasons Eatings. You can find Seasons Eatings wherever you download your favorite podcasts. And of course, all links can be found at seasonseatingspodcast.com. If you'd like to reach out, you can send me a quick email at seasonseatingspodcast@gmail.com. And please subscribe to the podcast if you can, so you don't miss any episodes as they are released. And if you're feeling extra generous this season, you can buy me an eggnog. Just click on the little cup in the corner at seasonseatingspodcast.com. So again, thank you, and I wish everyone for you and your family a very Merry Christmas and a happy and prosperous New Year.